In the studio with you is Eric Latif, Nduoko, CT Muga, and on the line is Ambassador Aline Kuster, Menager. She is the French ambassador to Kenya, and joining us shortly is Deputy Ambassador of Switzerland to Kenya, Burundi, Rwanda, Somalia, and Uganda, Patrick Egloff. But before that, CT Muga, today's proverb.
Right. Being a leader is like a borrowed garment.
Being a leader is like a borrowed garment.
Yes. It's a Ugandan proverb.
Not you, not yours.
No. I
Doesn't
wish.
belong.
You have no idea how often I wish to pepper some of these proverbs and add a few of my thoughts. But then they wouldn't be African proverbs. They would be CT Muga proverbs.
They would be like
CT Muga, the African.
CT's fables.
Yes,
like
exactly.
Aesop's fable.
Yes, and that's really not the purpose of this. Is to talk about what other people and other communities and other experiences have, should we say, amalgam themselves into proverbs.
Right.
It's not my view.
Very true. Still looking at the conversation about the French language, culture, and everything Francophonie. And also joining us now on the line is the Deputy Ambassador of Switzerland to Kenya, Burundi, Rwanda, Somalia, and Uganda, Patrick Egloff. Good morning.
Good morning to everybody. Good morning to the listeners, Madam Ambassador. I'm very happy to join you all.
Good morning.
Thank you very much. Mr. Ambassador, let's just jump right into the deep end. What percentage of the Swiss community are French or speak French?
If I may start first with a greeting. My ambassador would have loved to be in the Situation Room, but he's traveling to Burundi. He's the whole week in Burundi. He was able to present his credentials or his accreditation to the president of Burundi, and of course he speaks French the whole week in Burundi. Now, in Switzerland, we have about 2 million people having French as their mother tongue, and this represents about 25% or a quarter of the Swiss population who speak French.
Excellent. So, what then would you say, in comparison to other languages that are spoken, is the influence of the French language and the French culture in Switzerland?
So the other languages that are spoken in Switzerland, I don't know whether you see it in the backdrop, like Belgium, we're a multilingual country. We speak German, about 2/3 of the Swiss population. We speak Italian, about 8%. French, a quarter of the population, and we speak Romansh. Very few people speak it in very mountainous areas in the Swiss Alps. So we're not only a multilingual, but also a multicultural country. And what brings this with French culture to Switzerland? I would say those who have been to Switzerland and those who know a bit of Swiss cuisine, the first thing that comes to mind is cheese. The fondue, and
Yes.
it's called fondue because it stems from the Swiss-French part and from the Alps. The same with the raclette. I don't know whether you know raclette. Have you ever eaten raclette?
You would need to explain it to us. Is it a living organism or is it?
There are many bacteria because it's cheese.
It's cheese, right?
Okay.
And we're very proud. We're very proud of our very good Swiss wine, and big part of it is grown and cultivated in the French-speaking area of Switzerland, on the shores of the Lake of Geneva and in the Netherlands.
But like Belgium, you're also known for your chocolate.
We're also known for our chocolates, and there are big chocolate factories in the Swiss French part, but there are also chocolate factories in the Swiss German part. So we're a chocolate country, and chocolate is produced all over, also in the Swiss Italian part.
I'm interested to know that. So you have multilingual, multicultural influences in Switzerland. How have you been able to create a balance within the country that can actually be done in other parts? Because I'll give you an example. If you went to Dakar, for example, and you've been to Paris, you can draw very many parallels, very many similarities. And until and unless you left Dakar and went to other parts of Senegal, you would not know that you were living outside of Paris. So how have you then, as a country, Switzerland, for example, been able to maintain that balance while being able to celebrate the individual cultures and languages that make up Switzerland?
This is a very interesting question. It allows me to explain you a little bit of the Swiss system. First of all, for those who do not know where Switzerland is situated in Europe, Switzerland is situated in the core, in the heart of Europe. Mm-hmm. Our neighboring countries are big countries, are the big European powers, Germany, France, and Italy. That's why we have those three languages spoken in Switzerland. Switzerland became independent more than 700 years ago. Mm-hmm. And it was always very important for the Swiss to be sovereign. And to put it maybe a bit bluntly, the Swiss Germans didn't want to be part of big Germany, the Swiss French didn't want to be part of big France, and the Swiss Italians didn't want to be part of Italy. So they wanted to have something on their own, which they called Switzerland. And this very much impacted the Swiss political system. So we have very important minority rights protection mechanism in the Swiss system. For instance, in government, in administration, the three languages, Italian, French, and German, are equivalent. Everybody can speak in his own language. Mm-hmm. We have many meetings, also at the embassy. Our Swiss-French colleagues speak in French, and the Swiss-German replies in Germany. And our government, for instance, we have 7 ministers, and it's always important to have a good mix also from different languages. So currently, out of the 7 ministers, one is one has Italian as mother tongue, 2 have French, or 3 have French as mother tongue, 2 have French as mother tongue, and 4 have German as mother tongue. All Swiss laws are published, and everything officially communicated by the government is published in the 3 languages. So that's how we, on the one hand, respect the different languages and how we cultivate it.
So if we were talking, you said 25% of the people in Switzerland speak French. Which of the languages and the countries they represent have a bigger influence on the Swiss community? I know you're going to tell me it's equally divided, and I'm going to tell you it never really is, but nonetheless, tell me.
Can you repeat the question?
Yes. The influence of the French culture, French language in Switzerland as compared to the Italian and the German.
That's a very difficult question, because at the end of the day, French is spoken in the French-speaking part of Switzerland, which is culturally quite different from the German-speaking part. So we come together as Swiss, respecting the different languages, but it's difficult to say whether the German has a stronger influence or the French has a stronger influence. Of course, we have 2/3 of the population speaking German, so in the media it's maybe a bit more important the German. But if I ask my friend in Geneva, is German really important? He would answer you, no, English is much more important than German, because we speak French when we are in a business meeting, or when we are at the United Nations in Geneva, we speak English.
What I hear you saying, Your Excellency, is that being Swiss, for the Swiss, supersedes whatever linguistic influences the languages, the diverse languages that you speak may have. Yes,
I would say so. If you ask a Swiss German whether he feels more like German or Swiss, he would. I think all would reply to you, we're part of a cultural space. The Swiss Germans are part of the German cultural space. The Swiss French are part of the French-speaking cultural space. but they very much feel Swiss. They don't feel like I'm French or I'm German, because we have our own identity, we have our own history as Switzerland.
Okay.
So how would you describe a Swiss person? This amalgam of languages and cultures, like you, the Swiss person. What are the hallmarks of a Swiss?
I think a Swiss. It's all difficult as a Swiss to describe a Swiss. It maybe the French ambassador who are very close to the Swiss border could describe better what a Swiss is, because it's always good to have an outside view on someone and on. But I would say the Swiss are very very open-minded. Speaking different languages helps. Switzerland is a very small country, so Swiss. I mean, whenever you sit in a car and drive more than 2 or 3 hours, you're abroad in Switzerland. So it's open-minded. Swiss traveled a lot, and the Swiss economy and business expanded a lot, and Switzerland is not at least extremely globally well connected country, both in terms of science, in terms of business. I think we're quite international.
If to ask the question, Madam Ambassador, we look at the celebration of language and culture, which is what Francophonie Week has been this year and years before. But then if we look at countries on the continent where there has been, unfortunately, divisive elements when it has come to language. And I'm going to look at the country of Cameroon, for example, whereby one of the elements that fuels the conflict today is the very fact that the French has been institutionalized to the point where those who speak English feel disenfranchised. Wouldn't this be a perfect opportunity where celebrations like this can actually bring people together? Because I'm looking at Switzerland, for example, that have been able to come together using all 3 languages and still operate. And I'm looking at a country like Cameroon, whereby the minority English-speaking side of the country is wishing that they would be part of the national cake. French being institutionalized in education, in government, across the country. We have the disenfranchisement. Isn't this an opportunity, even as a thing like Francophonie Week is being celebrated, to say that language can actually be a joining force as opposed to a divisive element?
Indeed, I cannot answer for the Cameroonese. I think it should be a question put to my colleague, ambassador of Cameroon. But it's not a question of language, it's a question of communities living together and how they can cope. And actually, French and English are the 2 official languages from Cameroon. So it's also a political issue that has to be settled. And I must say, I agree with you that Switzerland is definitely an interesting example of what governance can be when it comes to a multicultural country, preserving the identity of the communities, their rights, and also building a national identity, and it's very strong when it comes to Switzerland. And I would like to answer the question you asked to the Swiss ambassador, because I'm very much linked to Swiss from my own personal history. Actually, my grandfather came from Switzerland at a time where Switzerland was immigrating a lot to other countries, and I know a little bit the Swiss, and I'm very interested by the way they govern the country. Local democracy is key to them, and it's part of the answer, how to have a lively local democracy so that these identities are preserved and expressed. And it's at the same time a very modern, creative, and open to the world country. So it's not impossible to reach this. It needs political will, and our Swiss colleagues can also demonstrate and that it is possible.
Indeed. Coming back to the question on Cameroon and such other examples, Madam Ambassador, and true what you say, much of this is a political effort that's required on local politics, but also with the kind of influence that France would have. And I think that's the question that Ndu was asking. this week that you celebrate the Francophonie week, would it not have been a very good opportunity for the political side of things also to be brought in and say, so how do we ensure that every Cameroonian, for example, feels Cameroonian, even those of us who speak French and those across the other line that speak English? But how can you use the politics, the time, the culture, the language, and this good bonhomie to basically influence the politics of the day?
I explained to you that Francophonie is also about diversity, preserving the diversity of languages and cultures. It's not about French taking the place of the English communities. It's not that at all. And then the Francophonie organization is also about common values and definitely democracy and the ability for people to express their identity in a multi-cultural world is key. So Francophonie organization can be a place where we can maybe facilitate this political choices, but it's up to the Cameroonese to take them up, and definitely France is pushing that on this. We are not seeing it as a cultural issue, a linguistic issue, but as a cultural one, where a minority area would like to have a better access to the democratic debate, but. Again, it's an issue for Cameroon to push on this, and also African Union is part of the picture when it comes to peace and security in the continent.
Languages, by their very existence, are an interesting tool, I figure, and I'm going to bring us into a little uncomfortable discussion. Languages, unfortunately, were seen during the times of colonialism as a tool for colonialism. It is now a tool for trade. It's now a tool for bringing actually people together. So when my colleagues bring in the issue of the Cameroonian influence, I'm going to ask this question. When we look at France, because France is the biggest representative of the French language, it's the dominant language that is spoken in France, what is it that the French do? And I'm talking about French generally, to ensure that their side of an understanding of their influence and the cultural penetration and benefits that they bring to the people of this continent are actually understood for what they are and are not mixed up with the politics. The politics will always come into the discussion.
I don't think we mix the French language and the politics. I think, as I said, we are deeply convinced that a language, and our language, and I must say we are proud of it, it's normal, is a key issue to share culture and indeed to live together in a world that is diverse and respective of all its cultural identities. So when it comes to Francophone Africa, it's a fact. If you want to communicate on a day-to-day basis, it's better to know French. Indeed, you will manage also with English, like we all do, because it tends to become also a lingua franca. But when you want to go deeper in the relationship and better understand your partner, and that was what the Egyptian ambassador very rightly pointed out, that you need to learn the language. It's not special to French, actually. I may say the same for Spanish. And indeed, when it comes to Africa and Kenya, Swahili is a very important language, and we make effort to learn and to develop also the teaching of Swahili in France, actually, and we are supportive of the efforts made by the Kenyan government to develop the teaching of Swahili. We are working together to on a rationalized curricula for this, and it's part of our DNA, I would say, to look into this and not to be French only oriented.
Deputy Ambassador Egloff, what do you think? where is the importance of the preservation of language and culture? And what do you think countries can do to make sure that they preserve their culture, that they preserve their language, kind of mirroring against what we see now happening with Francophonie Week every year?
So as it was mentioned a couple of times during this program, is that languages give access to a culture, and through this access to another culture, to a different culture, it enriches. And I was very surprised. A lot of people relate Switzerland with multilingualism, and indeed most Swiss speak two national languages and English. When I came to Kenya, I was very surprised that, and I didn't know that most Kenyans speak three languages as well. Mm-hmm. Their own language, Kiswahili, and English. Mm-hmm. So I think you're in a very good situation to measure a bit the richness that it gives to you as a country, and that it gives to you as a person when you master more than one language. And if you have access to more than one culture, if you can read a book in an original language or watch a movie in an original language and not only subtitled or dubbed. So what can be done to preserve multilingualism? Most importantly is practice language, speak language, make an effort to use your own language, even also in your country, use your own mother tongue. Do not only speak English, as we use our mother tongues in Switzerland as well. And then in Switzerland, we have, as I mentioned it before, we have also kind of legal protection measures and promotion. We have, for instance, we have the Swiss TV channel in Italian. We have about 8% of the Swiss population. There are 300,000-400,000 people speaking Italian as a mother tongue. It's not a business to run a TV station for 300,000-400,000 people, but it is something important that the government is willing to provide, because it is important for the Swiss Italian to have an own radio channel, an own TV channel. So this is one part, and I also mentioned that we publish anything that is published from the government in the three languages. This relates with a cost, but we definitely think in Switzerland that it's worthwhile. It's worthwhile investment.
Thank you very much. We want to thank you very much, ambassadors, for joining us. Ambassador Aline Kuster, Menager, the French ambassador to the country, Patrick Egloff, the deputy ambassador of Switzerland to Kenya. We also had a conversation with the Egyptian ambassador Khalid Al-Abiad and Nicolas Nihon, the ambassador of Belgium to the country. Asante sana for joining us, and especially you, Madam Ambassador, for staying on the line with us for this long. Asante for speaking to us.